Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The steering wheel felt cold under Calder Brooks' calloused hands as he guided his pickup truck along the winding country road. Each mile closer to his mother-in-law's house tightened the knot in his stomach. Sunday dinners with Dolores Wynn had become a special kind of torture over the years. "You missed the turn," Rhea said, her voice carrying that edge it often had these days. Calder glanced at his wife. Even after 17 years of marriage, Rhea's beauty still struck him. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, high cheekbones, and eyes that used to light up when they looked at him. Now they just looked elsewhere. "I know where I'm going," he muttered, taking the next right. In the rearview mirror, he caught sight of Maisie, their 8-year-old daughter. She sat unnaturally still, her small hands folded in her lap, her eyes focused on the passing trees. Usually, she'd be chattering about school or her latest book. Today, she was quiet. Too quiet. "You okay back there, Maisie Daisy?" Calder asked. Maisie's eyes flickered to meet his in the mirror. "Yes, Daddy." Her voice was small, almost a whisper. Something was off. Calder couldn't pin it down, but his instincts, the same ones that helped him diagnose engine problems by sound alone, were screaming at him. "Your mother's making pot roast," Rhea said, checking her lipstick in the visor mirror. "Your favorite." It wasn't his favorite. It had never been his favorite. 17 years, and she still got that wrong, or pretended to. The rest of the drive passed in silence until they pulled up to Dolores's sprawling farmhouse. The place was immaculate, as always, fresh paint, perfectly trimmed hedges, not a weed in sight. "Best behavior," Rhea reminded him as they climbed out of the truck. Calder helped Maisie down from the back seat, noticing how she clung to his hand longer than usual. He squeezed her small fingers reassuringly. "We'll survive," he whispered to her with a wink. "We always do." Maisie didn't smile back. Instead, she glanced toward the house, then back at him with wide eyes. "Daddy," she began, but the front door swung open before she could continue. Dolores Wynn stood in the doorway, ramrod straight in a perfectly pressed blouse and slacks, her silver hair arranged in an immovable helmet. At 63, she still carried herself like the school principal she'd been for 30 years, someone used to being obeyed without question. "You're late," she announced, checking her watch pointedly. They were 5 minutes early. "Traffic, Mom," Rhea said, hurrying up the steps to kiss her mother's cheek. "You know how it gets." There was no traffic. They lived in rural Oregon, not downtown Portland. The lies slid so easily from Rhea's lips that Calder wondered what other untruths she told that he'd missed. Inside, the house smelled of roasted meat and furniture polish. Dolores's dining room was a shrine to propriety: heavy oak furniture, china cabinet filled with heirlooms, and a table set with precision. Sit," Dolores directed, pointing Calder to his usual spot at the far end of the table, opposite herself. Rhea took her place at her mother's right hand, leaving Maisie to sit beside Calder. Dolores disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a platter of steaks, not pot roast. "I thought we were having pot roast," Calder said, looking directly at his wife. That Rhea's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mom changed her mind. Steaks are better anyway." Dolores set the platter down and began serving. Prime cuts, not that supermarket garbage. Calder watched as she placed a thick steak on his plate, followed by potatoes and green beans arranged with surgical precision. There was something performative about the whole thing, from the careful way she handled his plate to the expectant look she gave him as she set it down. "Eat while it's hot," Rhea urged, her voice oddly tight. "You'll love it." Calder picked up his knife and fork, then paused. Rhea was watching him too intently, her gaze fixed on his plate. She'd barely touched her own food, despite usually being the first to dig in. "Aren't you hungry?" he asked her. "Just waiting to see if you like it," she said, her smile strained. Maisie sat beside him, her small body rigid in her chair. She hadn't reached for her cutlery. Instead, she stared at his plate with an expression Calder couldn't quite read: fear, worry. "What about you, Maisie Daisy? Not hungry either?" She shook her head slightly, then looked up at her grandmother, who was cutting into her steak with precise movements. Before he could take a bite, Maisie suddenly knocked over her water glass. The liquid spread across the pristine tablecloth, drawing gasps from both Rhea and Dolores. Maisie, Rhea snapped. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Maisie cried, genuine tears springing to her eyes. Dolores was already on her feet, rushing to the kitchen for towels. Rhea followed, throwing a disapproving look at Calder as if it were somehow his fault. The moment they left, Maisie moved with surprising speed. She reached across Calder and switched his steak with Dolores's untouched one. Maisie, what? He began, but she cut him off. This will be okay now, she whispered urgently, her small face deadly serious. Don't eat the other one, Daddy. Please. Before he could ask more, Rhea and Dolores returned with towels and stern expressions. Maisie shrank back in her seat, the picture of remorse as they mopped up the spill. Honestly, Calder, you need to teach her better table manners, Dolores scolded. It was an accident, he said, protective instinct rising. She's 8, not 18. Dolores returned to her seat and picked up her fork without looking closely at her plate, the plate that now held the steak originally meant for Calder. Calder glanced at his daughter, who gave him the smallest of nods. Whatever was happening, she was asking him to trust her. And he did, without question. He pretended to eat, cutting small pieces and moving them around his plate while making appreciative noises. Rhea seemed to relax, taking a few bites of her own meal at last. 10 minutes into the meal, Dolores paused mid-sentence. Her fork clattered against her plate as her hand suddenly went limp. A strange look crossed her face, confusion, then alarm. Mother, Rhea asked, are you okay? Dolores opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, her eyes rolled back, and she slumped forward, her face narrowly missing her plate as she collapsed onto the table. Mom! Rhea screamed, jumping to her feet. She rushed to Dolores's side, shaking her shoulder. Mom, can you hear me? Calder was already pulling out his phone, dialing 911 with steady fingers. As he reported the emergency, he watched his wife's reaction with new eyes. Her panic seemed too loud, too theatrical, the gestures too broad, the cries too piercing. It was the performance of distress, not distress itself. The ambulance is on its way, he said, hanging up. We should lay her on the floor, in case she's having a stroke. Together, they moved Dolores from the chair to the hardwood floor. She was breathing, but unresponsive. Rhea kept up her display of concern, repeatedly checking her mother's pulse and calling her name. Maisie stood back, silent tears streaming down her face. When Calder caught her eye, she looked at her mother, then back at him meaningfully. The ambulance arrived within minutes. The paramedics worked efficiently, loading Dolores onto a stretcher after checking her vitals. I'm going with her, Rhea announced, grabbing her purse. You take Maisie home. Calder nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As the ambulance pulled away, he turned to his daughter, who stood shivering despite the warm evening. The drive back was silent. Maisie stared out the window, occasionally wiping away tears. Calder's mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened. He waited until they were home, until he'd helped Maisie change into her pajamas and tucked her into bed, before asking the question burning in his throat. Maisie, he said, sitting on the edge of her bed, why did you switch the steaks? In the soft glow of her nightlight, his daughter looked both younger and older than her 8 years. She clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest. I saw Mommy put something in it, she whispered, earlier when she was helping Grandma cook. She thought I was watching TV, but I went to get water and saw her. She poured something from a little bottle onto your steak when Grandma wasn't looking. Tears welled in her eyes again. I didn't know what to do, Daddy. I was scared. Calder felt ice spread through his veins, but he kept his face calm for Maisie's sake. You did the right thing, sweetheart. You were very brave. Is Grandma going to die? She asked, her voice small. No, he assured her, though he had no way of knowing. The doctors will help her. Try not to worry. He stayed until she fell asleep, then went downstairs to the kitchen, his mind working like an engine in high gear. If what Maisie said was true, and he had no reason to doubt her, then Rhea had tried to poison him tonight. And instead, she'd poisoned her own mother. Calder poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and drank it in one swallow. The burn in his throat was nothing compared to the cold fury building in his chest. He'd sensed something was wrong in his marriage, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Point one thing was clear, though. His wife had tried to kill him tonight. And something in Calder, something cold and hard and determined, came alive at that realization. He wouldn't be a victim. He'd find the truth, and then he'd make her pay. But first, he needed to protect Maisie. Whatever happened next, his daughter had to be safe. Calder took out his phone and made a call. "Neil, it's Calder. We need to talk." The hospital corridors smelled of disinfectant and despair. Calder sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair outside the ICU, watching nurses and doctors rush past with purposeful strides. He'd been there for 3 hours, waiting for news about Dolores, who remained in a coma. More importantly, he was watching Rhea. His wife stood at the nurse's station, her back to him as she spoke with a colleague. From a distance, she looked like the picture of a concerned daughter, shoulders slumped, gestures weary. But Calder had spent the past weeks studying her with new eyes, and he saw what others missed. The lack of real worry in her posture, the way her voice changed pitch when talking about her mother's condition, the calculated pauses before responding to doctors' questions. That IT was all an act. A damn good one, but an act nonetheless. "Mr. Brooks?" Calder looked up to see Dr. Levine, the neurologist handling Dolores's case. "Any change?" The doctor shook his head. "I'm afraid not. The toxicology report came back inconclusive. We're still trying to determine what caused her collapse. But it was poison, right? That's what you suspected." Dr. Levine glanced toward Rhea, then back to Calder. "We can't say for certain. There are several possibilities: stroke, heart arrhythmia, toxic reaction. We're running more tests." Calder nodded, understanding the subtext. Without proof, no one was ready to suggest poisoning, especially not with the victim's daughter being a well-respected nurse at this very hospital. "Thank you, doctor." As Levine walked away, Rhea approached, her nurse's shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. "You didn't have to come," she said, her tone suggesting this was a burden rather than a husband supporting his wife. "She's my mother-in-law," Calder replied evenly. "And Maisie wanted to know how her grandmother is doing." "Speaking of Maisie, where is she?" "With Neil and his wife. They took her to the movies, try to keep her mind off things." Rhea's lips tightened at the mention of Neil. She'd never liked Calder's oldest friend, claiming he was a bad influence. In reality, Neil saw through Rhea's facade years ago, and she knew it. The night Dolores collapsed, after speaking with Neil, Calder had made a decision. He would play this smart. No confrontation, no accusations. He would gather evidence first. And so, for the past week, he'd been the perfect husband, attentive, understanding, even sympathetic. He'd cooked dinners, handled Maisie's school schedule, and never once mentioned the switch stakes or his suspicions. All the while, he'd been watching, listening, waiting. The charade continued at home that evening. Calder picked up Maisie from Neil's, made a simple dinner of spaghetti and meatballs, and helped with her homework. He was tucking her in when his phone buzzed with a text from Rhea, "Staying late. Don't wait up." It wasn't the first such message this week. The timing was perfect. "Sleep tight, Maisie Daisy," he said, kissing his daughter's forehead. "Mrs. Abernathy from next door will be here if you need anything. I have to run out for a bit." "Is it about Mommy?" Maisie asked, her eyes wide in the darkness. The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" She clutched her rabbit tighter. "Mommy's been different. Scary different. Is that why you're going out?" Calder hesitated, torn between protecting his daughter from harsh truths and underestimating her intelligence. "I'm just going to check on something," he finally said. "Nothing for you to worry about. You'll be careful, always." After arranging for Mrs. Abernathy to keep an ear out, Calder drove back toward town. But instead of heading to the hospital, he turned down the familiar street to their home. Rhea's car wasn't in the driveway as expected. Inside the silent house, Calder moved with purpose. He'd never been the type to snoop, had always respected Rhea's privacy. But that was before she tried to kill him that he started in the bedroom, methodically searching through Rhea's belongings. Her dresser drawers revealed nothing unusual. The bathroom cabinet contained only normal toiletries. Her nightstand held a novel, hand cream, and her reading glasses, Then he checked her phone charger empty. She had her phone with her, which was not surprising. But her old phone, the one she'd replaced last month, claiming it was acting up, might still be around. After 30 minutes of searching, he found it in a shoebox at the back of her closet, along with a charger. Heart pounding, he plugged it in. It would take a few minutes to power up. While waiting, he turned his attention to their home office. The desk was neatly organized, bills in one folder, household documents in another. He was about to move on when he noticed the insurance paperwork, their life insurance policies. Opening the folder, Calder's blood ran cold. His policy had been upgraded 6 months ago. The coverage increased from $250,000 to $1 million. The beneficiary was Rhea. He didn't remember agreeing to this change. Scanning the documents, he found his signature at the bottom, except it wasn't quite right. The loop on the C was wrong, the slant of the letters slightly off. Close, but not his, forged at a soft chime from the bedroom, interrupted his thoughts. The old phone had powered on. Back in the bedroom, Calder picked up the device. It required a passcode, which would normally have stopped him. But Rhea was a creature of habit, and she'd used the same code for years. Maisie's birthday. He typed in 0713, and the phone unlocked. What he found made his stomach turn. Deleted text messages, recovered through a backup app Rhea had apparently forgotten about. Calls logs to a number saved only as V. And in the photo gallery, pictures of Rhea with a man Calder didn't recognize sitting close a restaurant, laughing on a park bench, and one that burned into his brain. The man kissing Rhea, his hand possessively on her waist. The timestamps showed these were from months ago, some dating back nearly a year. Then came the messages. Dozens of them between Rhea and this V. Miss you already. Can't wait to be with you for real. When will you tell him? Not yet. We need to stick to the plan. Getting rid of him isn't as easy as you think. It will be worth it. Trust me. The most recent exchange made Calder's hands shake with rage. V. Did it work? Rhea, no. Something went wrong. It was my mother instead. V. Jesus, Rhea. Is she dead? Rhea, coma. We need to wait. Try again later. V. This is getting messy. Rhea, I know what I'm doing. Just be patient. Calder sat heavily on the bed, the phone clutched in his hand. It was worse than he'd imagined. Not just attempted murder, but a calculated plan with an accomplice. A lover. His wife wanted him dead, and she wasn't working alone. The sound of a car in the driveway jolted him from his thoughts. Quickly, he took photos of the key messages with his own phone, then returned the old phone to its hiding place exactly as he'd found it. He was in the kitchen, casually making a sandwich, when Rhea walked in. Her surprise at seeing him was evident. I thought you'd be in bed, she said, setting down her purse. Got hungry, he replied, forcing a normalcy into his voice that he didn't feel. How's your mother? The same. She sighed, the picture of exhaustion. I'm going to shower. As she disappeared upstairs, Calder leaned against the counter, his appetite gone. The woman he'd shared a bed with for 17 years, the mother of his child, had been plotting his death while sleeping with another man. Later, lying beside Rhea in the darkness, listening to her even breathing, Calder made his second decision of the week. He wouldn't just gather evidence, he would find out who V was. And then he'd blow their entire plan apart. That Neil's garage smelled of motor oil, metal, and the cheap coffee he brewed by the gallon. It was a smell Calder associated with honesty, raw and uncomplicated. Unlike the artificial lavender scent Rhea sprayed around their house, masking who knew what. She did what? Neil Huxley's voice was a controlled growl as he wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag. At 45, Neil was built like the motorcycles he restored, solid, dependable, with rough edges that cut if you weren't careful. Tried to poison me, Calder repeated, keeping his voice low despite the empty garage. And she's been cheating, planning this with some guy. Neil tossed the rag aside, his weathered face tight with anger. I always said that woman was trouble, Cal. From day one. I need your help, Neil. I need to find out who this guy is. You have a name, just an initial. V. After a long pause, Neil nodded. I know someone who might help. Yvonne Greer. She's an ER nurse, used to work with Rhea before they had some kind of falling out. If anyone knows your wife's secrets, it'd be her. 2 hours later, Calder sat in a corner booth at Pete's Diner, a greasy spoon on the edge of town where hospital staff often grabbed meals between shifts. Neil had arranged the meeting, then made himself scarce. His presence would only complicate things. Yvonne Greer arrived precisely on time, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her movements efficient as she slid into the booth. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Neil said this is about Rhea," she said, fixing Calder with a direct stare. "What do you want to know?" "Everything you can tell me," Calder replied. "Especially anything about a man she might be seeing. Someone whose name starts with V." Yvonne's expression shifted subtly. "Recognition. Vince," she said after a moment. "Vince Elridge." The name hit Calder like a physical blow. "Who is he?" "Handyman. Does odd jobs around town, some construction. He worked on the hospital's East Wing renovation last year." She paused. "That's where they met. And they've been having an affair, among other things." Yvonne's mouth twisted with distaste. "Look, Rhea and I were friends once. Good friends. We started at the hospital together, went through the trenches of night shifts and difficult patients. I thought I knew her. What changed? I caught her stealing drugs from the pharmacy. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger inventory alarms. When I confronted her, she said it was for her mother's pain. Dolores has arthritis. I believed her at first." Calder leaned forward. But then I saw her with Vince in the parking lot, handing off a package. "I'm not naive, Mr. Brooks. That wasn't arthritis medication. Did you report them?" "I tried. But Vince has a record, minor stuff, but enough that my word against theirs looked like I was the one with a vendetta. Hospital administration warned me about making accusations without proof. A month later, I was transferred to the ER, and Rhea made sure everyone knew I was unstable." Calder absorbed this, feeling pieces click into place. "When was this?" "About 8 months ago, right around when Rhea had started growing distant, when the insurance policy had been changed." "There's more," Yvonne said, lowering her voice. "Rhea's been taking a lot of night shifts lately, claiming she's covering for staff shortages. But I checked the schedule. She's not on half the time she says she is." "She's been with him," Calder concluded. Yvonne nodded. "That would be my guess." "And Mr. Brooks?" "Vince Elridge isn't just some handyman with a side hustle and pills. He's dangerous. He's done time for assault, and there are rumors he was involved in worse." "Like what?" "Like a fire at his ex-girlfriend's place after she dumped him. Nothing was ever proven, but—" She shrugged, the implication clear. Calder felt cold determination replace his initial shock. "Thank you, Ms. Greer. You've been very helpful. What are you going to do?" "What I have to," he said simply. "To protect my daughter." Yvonne studied him, then reached into her purse and wrote something on a napkin. "My number. If you need anything else, a statement, testimony, whatever, call me. Rhea Brooks has hurt enough people." After she left, Calder sat alone, turning over everything he'd learned. Vince Elridge, a name to the faceless threat, a target for his growing rage, that he pulled out his phone and searched the name. Several results came up, including a Facebook page with limited public information. The profile picture showed a man in his late 30s with sharp features and the cocky smile of someone who thought rules didn't apply to him. This was the man his wife wanted to replace him with. The man she was willing to kill for. Calder saved the image, then scrolled through local business listings until he found what he was looking for: Elridge Home Repairs. The website was basic, with a phone number and a list of services. No address, but there was another listing: the Rusty Nail, a dive bar on Highway 16. The review mentioned Vince at the pool table every Thursday, ready to take your money. Today was Thursday. Calder finished his coffee and left a generous tip for the waitress. He had one more stop to make. The Rusty Nail lived up to its name, a tetanus risk disguised as a bar. The parking lot was half full, mostly with trucks and older model cars. Country music spilled out when Calder pushed open the door. Along with the smell of beer and fried food, he scanned the dimly lit interior, eyes adjusting to the darkness. A horseshoe-shaped bar dominated one side. Scattered tables filled the middle, and 2 pool tables stood in the back. A small group had gathered around one table, watching a game in progress. Calder made his way to the bar and ordered a beer he had no intention of drinking. As the bartender slid the bottle toward him, he asked casually, "Vince Elridge around tonight?" The bartender, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and efficiently quick hands, jerked her head toward the pool tables. "Holding court, as usual. You a friend?" "Something like that," Calder replied, dropping a bill on the counter. "Thanks." Beer in hand, he drifted toward the back, positioning himself where he could observe without being obvious. The game was just ending, with a stocky man in a flannel shirt reluctantly handing over what looked like $40 to his opponent. Vince Elridge was taller in person than he'd appeared in his photo, with a lean build and the fluid movements of someone comfortable in his own skin. His dark hair was styled with more care than most men in this bar would bother with, and his closed jeans and a black button-down looked expensive. He moved around the pool table like he owned it, racking up balls for the next game, casually bantering with the small audience. A predator among prey, confident in his position at the top of this particular food chain, the Calder's hand tightened around his beer bottle. This man and Rhea had planned his death together, had laughed about it, perhaps in this very bar that he waited, watching as Vince played and won another game. The crowd thinned as people drifted back to the bar or left for the night. Finally, Vince was alone at the table, practicing shots while nursing a whiskey. Calder approached, setting his untouched beer on a nearby high top. "You're good," he commented. Vince glanced up, a ready smile, and placed the kind used on potential marks. "Thanks. Play much?" "Not for a while." Calder picked up a cue from the rack. "Mind if I join you?" "Free country." Vince gestured to the table. "Rack him up. $20 a game." "Sure." As Calder arranged the balls in the triangle, he kept his face turned slightly away, wondering if Vince knew what he looked like. Had Rhea shown him photos? Described her husband in detail? Or was he just a faceless obstacle to be removed? They played in silence for a few minutes, each taking measure of the other's skill. Vince was good, precise shots, strategic thinking. But Calder had spent countless hours at a similar table in Neil's garage, and he held his own. "You new around here?" Vince asked eventually, sinking a difficult corner shot. "Don't think I've seen you before. Just passing through." Calder lied smoothly. "Heard this was the place to find a game." "Well, you heard right." They continued playing, the conversation casual sports, the weather, nothing personal. Vince won the first game. Calder handed over $20 without comment and suggested another. Double or nothing. Vince offered, confident now. Why not? Halfway through the second game, Calder decided it was time. "You do construction, right? I think I've seen your truck around town." Vince looked up, slightly more alert. "Yeah, Elridge Home Repairs. You need work done?" "Maybe. My wife mentioned you fixed something at the hospital where she works. Said you did good work." "Oh yeah? Who's your wife?" "Rhea Brooks. She's a nurse in the surgical wing." The change was instant. Vince's casual demeanor vanished, replaced by a cold calculation as he straightened up from the pool table. His eyes narrowed as he really looked at Calder for the first time. "You're Calder Brooks," he said, not a question, but a statement. Calder met his gaze steadily. "That's right." For a moment, neither man spoke. The bar continued around them, music playing, glasses clinking, conversations flowing, but they stood in a bubble of dangerous silence. "What's this about?" Vince finally asked, his hand tightening on the pool cue. "I think you know exactly what it's about," Calder replied, his voice low. "You and my wife. The poison. All of it." Vince's laugh held no humor. "Man, I don't know what you think you know, but you should walk away right now. Go home. Pretend we never met. Like you're pretending you're not sleeping with my wife. Like you're both pretending you didn't try to kill me. You're a dead man walking, Brooks." Vince stepped closer, menace in every line of his body. "You just don't know it yet." "Is that a threat?" "Call it friendly advice. Accidents happen all the time. Car brakes fail. Houses catch fire. People fall downstairs." The cold calculation in Vince's voice confirmed everything Calder had suspected. This wasn't just about an affair, this was about eliminating him permanently. "Tell me something," Calder said, fighting to keep his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "Was it her idea or yours? The poison, I mean." Something flickered in Vince's eyes, surprise, maybe pride. "Wouldn't you like to know? Smart, isn't she?" "Well, usually." His smirk returned. "Shame about the mother-in-law." "Bad luck, that." The casual admission, The smug satisfaction on Vince's face snapped Calder's carefully maintained control. Before he could think, his fist connected with Vince's jaw, sending the man staggering back against the pool table. Vince recovered quickly, wiping blood from his split lip. "Big mistake," he growled, then lunged. The fight was brutal and short. Vince had the advantage of youth and regular bar brawls, but Calder had spent decades working with metal welding, lifting, bending. His hands were tools hardened by years of physical labor, and fury gave him strength. They crashed into the pool table, scattering balls and drawing shouts from nearby patrons. Fists connected with flesh, grunts of pain punctuating each blow. Calder took a hit to the ribs that nearly doubled him over, but responded with an uppercut that snapped Vince's head back. The bartender was yelling for them to take it outside. Someone else was calling for help. But Calder couldn't stop. Not until Vince was on the floor, blood streaming from his nose, his eyes glazed. "You stay away from my family," Calder growled, standing over him. "You so much as look at my daughter, and I'll end you." As the sound of approaching sirens filtered through the bar's open door, Calder made a split-second decision. He reached down and grabbed Vince's phone from his pocket, then headed for the back exit, disappearing into the night before anyone could stop him in his truck, hands shaking with adrenaline and pain from split knuckles. Calder examined his prize. The phone was locked, but he'd worry about that later. What mattered was that he'd confronted the man who wanted him dead, and he'd walked away with potential evidence. The IT wasn't what he'd planned. But sometimes plans changed. As he drove away, tasting blood from a cut on his lip, Calder knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. "You did what?" Neil's voice was a mixture of disbelief and reluctant admiration as he handed Calder an ice pack for his swollen knuckles. "Beat the hell out of him," Calder replied, wincing as he settled into Neil's worn couch. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving him acutely aware of every bruised rib and throbbing cut. "And I took his phone." They were in Neil's apartment above the garage, a sparse, functional space that smelled of cigarettes despite Neil's claims he'd quit years ago. It was nearly midnight, and Calder had called Mrs. Abernathy to check on Maisie before heading here. He couldn't go home looking like this, not without frightening his daughter or alerting Rhea. Neil shook his head, examining the phone Calder had placed on the coffee table. "This is either the dumbest or most brilliant thing you've ever done. Probably both. Can you unlock it?" "Maybe." Neil picked up the device, turning it over in his hands. "These newer models have decent security, but I know a guy who might help. Used to work in phone repair before he got into customizing bikes." "How soon?" "I'll call him first thing tomorrow." Neil fixed Calder with a serious look. "What's your plan here, Cal? You can't just go around assaulting people and stealing phones. Not if you want to keep custody of Maisie when this all blows up." The mention of his daughter sobered Calder. He'd been operating on rage and instinct, but Neil was right. He needed a strategy. "I need concrete proof of what they're planning," he said. "Something I can take to the police, something that will stick. And I need to make sure Maisie is protected through all of it." "And what about Rhea? She's still your wife, still living in your house, still the mother of your kid. How long can you keep pretending nothing's wrong?" It was a fair question. The past 2 weeks had been an exhausting charade, maintaining normalcy at home while investigating Rhea's betrayal in secret. Every smile, every casual conversation, every moment lying beside her in bed felt like swallowing broken glass. "As long as I have to," Calder answered grimly. "For Maisie's sake." Neil handed him a beer from the fridge. "You should at least tell Pastor Finch what's going on. Get some advice from someone who isn't as likely as me to suggest burying Vince in the woods." Despite everything, Calder managed a short laugh. "You suggesting I seek spiritual guidance, Neil? That's new. Leland Finch isn't your average pastor. Before he found God, he found plenty of trouble. Man knows more about the dark side of human nature than most cops. Plus, he's discreet." Calder considered this. He wasn't particularly religious, attending church mainly on Easter and Christmas to please his late mother. But Leland Finch had officiated at his mother's funeral, and there had been something genuine about the man's compassion. "I'll think about it," he said, which was as close to agreement as he usually came. 2 days later, Calder sat in Neil's garage, staring at Vince's unlocked phone with a sense of cold triumph that Neil's friend had come through, bypassing the security with a combination of technical skill and questionable software. Now, the evidence Calder had been seeking lay in his hands. Jesus, Neil muttered, looking over Calder's shoulder at the screen. They weren't even subtle about it. The messages between Vince and Rhea told a damning story. What had begun as flirtatious texts last year had evolved into explicit discussions of their affair, plans for a future together, and most chillingly detailed plans to remove the obstacle of Calder himself. She wanted it to look like an accident, Calder said, scrolling through the exchange. Something that wouldn't raise suspicions. The poison was supposed to mimic a heart attack, Neil pointed out, indicating a particularly detailed message from Rhea. Succinylcholine causes paralysis, respiratory failure. Hard to detect in an autopsy if not specifically looked for. She had access to it at the hospital. Calder felt sick. The clinical precision of their planning was somehow worse than if it had been a crime of passion. This was calculated, deliberate murder. But the most valuable evidence came in the form of voice recordings. Vince, it seemed, had been smart enough to protect himself by recording several of their conversations insurance in case Rhea tried to double-cross him. Calder played one, his hand shaking slightly as Rhea's familiar voice filled the garage. Once it's done, we wait a month before selling the house. The insurance payout will come through. I've checked everything 3 times. $1 million, tax-free. We split it 50-50 like we agreed. Vince's voice replied. And the kid? You sure she won't be a problem? Maisie. Rhea sounded dismissive. She's 8. She adores me. She'll adjust. Kids are resilient. And if she saw something, said something, who'll believe her over me? I'm her mother. I'm the grieving widow. Besides, she doesn't know anything. The casual cruelty in her tone, the complete disregard for their daughter's feelings, hit Calder harder than any physical blow. This was the woman he'd built a life with, the woman he'd trusted with his child. In another recording, dated just 3 days ago, Rhea's frustration was evident. We need to be careful now. My mother's still in a coma. If she wakes up and remembers anything, she won't, Vince assured her. And even if she did, who's going to believe an old woman with brain damage? We just need to wait, try again later. Maybe not poison this time. Something more direct. I can't believe Maisie switched the plates. That little brat ruined everything. Hey, at least we know she's not as clueless as you thought. We need to watch her. Calder stopped the recording, his vision tunneling with rage. They knew. They knew Maisie had saved him, and they were watching her, planning around her. I'll kill them both, he said, his voice hollow. Neil gripped his shoulder. No, that's not the way, and you know it. We have what we need now. We go to the police. And what if it's not enough? What if they twist it somehow? Rhea's good at playing the victim, and I have a history of losing my temper. Everyone in town knows about the fight I had with Bill Ransom last year over that botched engine work. Then we build a stronger case, Neil insisted. Get Yvonne Greer's statement about the stolen drugs. Find out exactly what poison was used on your mother-in-law. Make it airtight. Calder nodded slowly, forcing himself to think rationally. Neil was right. Rushing in with half-formed evidence and blind rage would only play into Rhea's hands. He needed to be smarter than that. I'll back up everything on this phone, he said, his voice steadier now. Make copies, store them in different places. And then I'm going to talk to Pastor Finch. Neil raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. What about Maisie? If they know she switched the plates, I'm not letting her out of my sight, Calder vowed. And neither are you when I can't be there. We protect her first, above everything else. The church was quiet on Thursday afternoon, with only a few elderly parishioners lighting candles in the small side chapel. Calder found Pastor Leland Finch in his office, surrounded by books and the lingering scent of pipe tobacco, a vice the pastor had never quite abandoned despite his conversion. Calder Brooks, Finch said, looking up from his desk with genuine pleasure. It's been a while. What brings you to my door? At 62, Finch had the weathered face of a man who had lived hard before finding his calling. His hands were rough, his blue eyes sharp with an intelligence that missed nothing. Rumors around town said he'd been everything from a con man to an undercover cop before becoming a pastor 20 years ago. I need advice, Pastor, Calder said, taking the offered seat across from the desk. Not the spiritual kind. Finch's expression grew serious. The other kind, then. Close the door. For the next hour, Calder laid out the whole story: Ria's betrayal, the poisoning attempt, Vince's threats, and the evidence he'd gathered. He held nothing back, including his own rage and desire for revenge. Finch listened without interruption, his face giving away nothing. When Calder finished, the pastor was silent for a long moment, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You've built a solid case," he finally said. "But you're right to be cautious about how you proceed. The legal system isn't always just, especially when dealing with someone like your wife, respected, connected, and very convincing." "What would you do?" Calder asked. Finch's smile was grim. "In my former life or my current one?" "Both. The pastor in me says to seek justice through proper channels. Trust the authorities, present your evidence, protect your daughter, and pray." He paused. "The man I used to be says destroy them so completely they never recover." "And which one is right?" "Both." "Neither." Finch shrugged. "The wisdom comes in finding the middle path. Justice without destruction of your own soul." He reached for a notepad, jotting down a name and number. Detective Taryn Leary. She's not local, works out of the county seat. Smart, incorruptible, and not easily charmed. If you go to law enforcement, go to her first. Unofficially, Calder pocketed the information. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet." Finch fixed him with a penetrating look. "What you're planning isn't just about evidence and arrests, is it? You want Ria to suffer. You want her to lose everything, the way she was willing to let you lose everything." It wasn't a question, and Calder didn't bother denying it. "Is that wrong?" "It's human," Finch replied. "But be careful, Calder. Revenge can consume you if you let it. And your daughter needs her father whole, not hollowed out by hatred. I won't let that happen. See that you don't." Finch stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "And Calder, when this is over, bring Maisie by. Children need community, especially after trauma. We have good people here who can help." Calder nodded, unexpectedly moved by the offer. "I will." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the church parking lot. Calder sat in his truck, considering his next steps. He had allies now: Neil, Yvonne, Pastor Finch. He had evidence. What he needed was a plan to bring everything together in a way that would ensure Ria and Vince faced consequences they couldn't escape. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number Finch had given him. "Detective Leary? My name is Calder Brooks. Pastor Finch suggested I call you. I need to discuss a matter of attempted murder." Calder sat at his kitchen table, morning coffee growing cold as he stared at the insurance documents spread before him. It was all for show papers Leary had helped him prepare, forms for changing his life insurance beneficiary. The sound of Ria's footsteps on the stairs made him quickly gather the papers into a folder, but not quickly enough. He wanted her to see. "What's that?" she asked, entering the kitchen in her nurse's scrubs, hair still damp from the shower. "Nothing important," he replied, the lie coming easily after a week of practice. "Just some paperwork." Ria poured herself coffee, her gaze lingering on the folder. "Insurance papers? Is something wrong?" Calder shrugged, feigning resignation. "Just making some changes. After your mother, it got me thinking about what would happen to Maisie if something happened to me." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Ria said automatically, but Calder caught the flicker of interest in her eyes. "Probably not, but I want to make sure she's taken care of directly. You understand." The implication hung in the air. He was changing his beneficiary from Ria to Maisie. He watched as she processed this, saw the calculations happening behind her concerned expression. "Of course," she finally said. "Is that really necessary, though? I would always take care of Maisie. I know you would." He summoned a weak smile. "It's not about trust, Ria. It's just, I need some control over something right now." He'd been playing this part for the past 5 days, the defeated husband, worn down by his mother-in-law's medical crisis, his distant wife, the weight of responsibility. He slouched more, spoke less, moved as if exhausted. And Ria had responded exactly as Leary predicted, relaxing her guard, becoming more solicitous, more present. "You've been under so much stress," she said now, placing a hand on his shoulder. The touch made his skin crawl, but he leaned into it slightly. Maybe we should take some time for ourselves. A dinner, just us. I'd like that, he said, looking up at her with what he hoped was gratitude rather than the disgust he actually felt. Maybe this weekend? Saturday, she decided, squeezing his shoulder. I'll make a reservation at Willow Creek. We can talk, reconnect. Willow Creek was the upscale restaurant where they'd celebrated their 10th anniversary. The choice was calculated a reminder of happier times, designed to lower his defenses further. That sounds nice, he agreed. She bent to kiss his cheek, and it took every ounce of self-control not to flinch. I've missed us, Calder. After she left for work, Calder sat motionless, fighting the urge to wash his face where her lips had touched him. Instead, he pulled out his phone and sent a text to Neil. Saturday. She suggested it herself. The reply came quickly. Perfect. Leary says we're a go. Later that day, Calder picked up Maisie from school, taking her for ice cream before her weekly art class, a ritual they'd maintained even as the rest of their lives had turned upside down. Can I have 2 scoops? She asked as they joined the line at Frosty's. Absolutely, Calder agreed, ruffling her hair. You've earned it. Maisie had been quieter since the night at Dolores's, but resilient in the way only children can be. She still smiled, still lost herself in books and drawings, still found moments of pure joy in simple pleasures. But she watched her mother differently now, with wary eyes that broke Calder's heart. Dad? She asked after they'd settled at a table with their ice cream. Is Mom mad at me? Calder froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. Why would you think that? Maisie pushed her chocolate chip around the bowl. She looks at me funny sometimes, like she's trying to figure something out. And she asks a lot of questions about what we talk about when she's not there. Alarm flared in Calder's chest. What kind of questions? If you ask about her. If you say mean things. If I tell you secrets. She looked up, eyes troubled. I don't tell her anything, but I think that makes her more mad. Calder set his spoon down, reaching across to take her small hand. Listen to me, Maisie Daisy. You haven't done anything wrong. Not one thing. Your mom is going through some difficult times. It's not about you. Is it because Grandma's in the hospital? Partly, he said carefully, unwilling to lie directly to his daughter, but unable to tell the full truth. Adults sometimes make bad choices when they're stressed or unhappy, but it's never, ever your fault. She seemed to accept this, returning to her ice cream with slightly more enthusiasm. Are you and Mom getting a divorce? The directness of the question caught him off guard. Why do you ask that? Emma's parents got divorced last year. She said they fought all the time first, but you and Mom don't fight. You just don't talk. She frowned. That seems worse somehow. Out of the mouths of babes. Calder thought about lying, about offering reassurances that everything would be fine. But Maisie deserved better than empty promises. I don't know what's going to happen, he said honestly. But I do know that no matter what, you and I are a team. Forever and always. That will never change. She nodded solemnly. Promise? Cross my heart, he said, making the gesture that had sealed their most important pacts since she was 4 years old. That night, after Maisie was asleep, Calder made his move. He left his laptop open on the kitchen table while he took a shower, a browser tab displaying information about changing life insurance beneficiaries. Another tab showed an appointment confirmation with his lawyer for Monday morning. Through earbuds hidden beneath his towel, he heard Rhea enter the kitchen, the soft sounds of movement as she investigated his laptop, then the unmistakable sound of fingers typing a text message being composed. He's doing it. Monday morning appointment with the lawyer. Need a move now. A reply came quickly. About damn time. Saturday's still on. Yes. I'll handle it. No mistakes this time. Need help? Not for this part. Just be ready after. Calder closed his eyes, leaning against the shower wall as water streamed over him. Part of him had still hoped against all evidence, against all reason that there had been some explanation, some misunderstanding. But here it was, final confirmation in Rhea's own words. She was planning to kill him on Saturday night. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it. Saturday arrived with deceptive calm, sunshine filtering through Oregon clouds, birds singing in the maple tree outside their bedroom window. Calder woke early, watching Rhea sleep beside him with a surreal detachment. This woman, who had shared his bed for nearly 2 decades, was a stranger to him now. The day passed in a strange haze. He took Maisie to Neil's sister's house, hugging her tightly before leaving. "Just one night, sweetheart," he promised. "I'll pick you up tomorrow for pancakes." "The ones with chocolate chips?" she asked. "Extra chocolate chips," he confirmed, trying to keep his voice steady. If anything went wrong tonight, but it wouldn't. Leary had been meticulous in her planning, and Neil would be nearby throughout. Still, Calder kissed Maisie's forehead one extra time before forcing himself to leave. Back home, he found Rhea preparing for their dinner with unusual care, hairstyled, makeup precise, a new dress laid out on the bed. She hummed as she moved around the bedroom, so at ease with her deadly intentions that it chilled him. "I thought we might have a drink here first," she suggested as he buttoned his shirt. "Before the reservation. It's been so long since we really talked." "Sounds nice," he agreed. The plan had anticipated this. Rhea wouldn't risk anything in a public restaurant. She'd want privacy for whatever she had planned. At T6, the doorbell rang. Rhea frowned, checking her watch. "Are you expecting someone?" "That's probably Neil," Calder said casually. "He mentioned stopping by to return that torque wrench he borrowed." "I forgot to tell you." Neil's booming voice filled the entryway as Calder let him in. "Hey, buddy. Oh, you're all dressed up, hot date night." "Just dinner with Rhea," Calder explained, as they'd rehearsed. "You remember that wrench you borrowed?" "Got it right here." Neil patted his jacket pocket, then turned as a woman appeared from his car. "Oh, and this is Taryn. Hope you don't mind. I brought her along. We've got our own dinner plans downtown." Detective Leary approached with a warm smile, dressed in civilian clothes that effectively disguised her profession. Her handshake was firm as Calder introduced her to Rhea, who masked her annoyance with practiced charm. "Lovely to meet you," Rhea said. "Would you both like to come in for a quick drink? We have time before our reservation." "Just one," Neil agreed cheerfully. "We can't stay long." In the living room, Rhea played the perfect hostess, offering wine and easy conversation while Calder fetched glasses from the kitchen. When he returned, Neil was regaling the group with a story about a customer's impossible demands, Leary laughing at all the right moments. "White or red?" Rhea asked, holding up 2 bottles. "White for me," Leary said. "Red," Neil and Calder answered simultaneously. Rhea poured with steady hands, passing glasses around before raising her own in a toast. To new friends and old, they clinked glasses. Calder pretended to sip his wine, watching Rhea over the rim. Her eyes flicked repeatedly to his glass, anticipation thinly veiled beneath her smile. "So how did you two meet?" she asked Leary, settling beside Calder on the sofa closer than she'd sat to him in months. As Leary spun a fictional tale about a chance meeting at a coffee shop, Neil excused himself to use the bathroom. This, too, was part of the plan. He would circle around to the back door, where a small team of officers waited for the signal. The conversation continued, mundane and meaningless. Calder felt each second tick by with excruciating slowness, hyper-aware of Rhea's every movement. Twice, she subtly encouraged him to drink more of his wine. Each time, he pretended to comply while actually consuming nothing. Neil returned, catching Calder's eye with a slight nod. Everything was in position. "Well, we should get going," Leary said, checking her watch. "Our reservation is at 7, and this place is supposedly strict about timing." "One moment," Rhea said, rising gracefully. "Let me get you those cookie recipes I promised." There in the kitchen, as she disappeared through the doorway, Leary moved closer to Calder, voice dropping to a whisper. "She hasn't done anything yet. The wine is clean. We need her to make a move." Calder nodded, his mouth dry. "She will. She's too committed to back out now." Neil positioned himself near the living room entrance, ready to intercept if Rhea tried to flee. Calder picked up his wine glass again, making a show of taking a larger swallow just as Rhea returned, recipe cards in hand. "Here you go," she said to Leary, passing them over. "My grandmother's secret recipe. The trick is the brown butter." "Thank you," Leary said warmly. "We really should be going." Calder, "Rhea, enjoy your evening." "Actually," Neil said, checking his phone with exaggerated concern, "the restaurant just texted. Some issue with the reservation. Give me 5 minutes to sort it out." It was another part of the script, designed to keep them in the house longer, giving Rhea another opportunity. Calder saw the calculation in her eyes. 5 more minutes alone with her husband and his nearly full glass of wine. Of course, she agreed smoothly. More wine while you wait. She refilled glasses without waiting for answers, her movements fluid with practice. Calder watched carefully, but saw no obvious tampering with his drink. Whatever she had planned, she was being cautious. Neil made a show of calling the restaurant. Stepping away for privacy, Rhea touched Calder's arm lightly. I'm going to check on that appetizer I left warming. Won't be a minute. The moment she was gone, Leary moved swiftly, switching Calder's glass with her own identical one. Drink for mine now, she whispered. It's clean. When Rhea returned with a small plate of canapes, Calder was holding Leary's glass as if it were his own. He took a real sip this time, maintaining eye contact with his wife over the rim. These look delicious, Leary commented, taking a canopy. Neil declined with a shake of his head, still pretending to be on his phone call. Family recipe, Rhea explained, offering the plate to Calder. Your favorite, honey. Calder took one, but didn't eat it, another precaution they'd planned. He set on a napkin beside him as he took another sip of wine. Good news, Neil announced, returning to the group. They fixed the reservation. We're all set. Wonderful, Leary said, standing. Thank you both for the hospitality. As goodbyes were exchanged, Calder felt tension winding tighter in his chest. Nothing had happened yet. Had they miscalculated? Was Rhea waiting for them to be alone? The front door closed behind Neil and Leary, leaving a sudden silence in the living room. Rhea turned to Calder with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Alone at last, she said. Finish your wine, and we can head to the restaurant. In a minute, Calder replied, setting the glass down. I need to use the bathroom first. In the hallway bathroom, he sent a quick text to Leary. Nothing yet. Waiting for my move. The reply came instantly. We're in position. Keep going. When he returned to the living room, Rhea was standing by the drinks cabinet, a small vial in her hand. She startled at his appearance, quickly slipping the container into her pocket. I thought I'd make us each one proper cocktail before we go, she said, recovering smoothly. An old-fashioned for you. Perfect, Calder agreed, watching as she set out glasses and ingredients. Her back was to him as she worked, blocking his view of the preparation. He moved quietly, positioning himself to see her reflection in the window opposite. There a quick movement as she added something from the vial to one of the drinks. Here you go, she said, turning with 2 identical glasses. To us. Calder accepted the glass, noticing a nearly imperceptible difference, a slightly darker color in his drink than hers. This was it, the moment they'd been waiting for. To us, he echoed, raising the glass but not drinking. And to new beginnings. Something in his tone must have alerted her. Rhea's smile faltered slightly. Aren't you going to drink? In a minute, he said. First, I think we should talk about what you just put in my drink. Her expression froze, then rearranged itself into innocent confusion. What are you talking about? The poison, Rhea. Just like what you put in my steak at your mother's house. Except Maisie switched the plates, and Dolores got it instead. All color drained from Rhea's face. You're not making any sense. Is this some kind of joke? No joke. Calder set the glass down carefully. I know everything. About the poison. About Vince. About your plans for the insurance money. For a moment, Rhea remained silent, assessing him with new eyes, calculating whether to continue denying or to shift tactics. Finally, she laughed softly, the sound devoid of humor. You think you know everything, she said, her voice hardening. But you don't know anything, Calder. You never have. I know enough, he replied steadily. I know you tried to kill me once already. I know you're trying again now. And I know why. Do you? She moved closer, all pretense gone. Do you really think it's just about money? It's about freedom. From this dead-end life, this dead-end town, this dead-end marriage. The raw contempt in her voice should have hurt, but Calder felt nothing but cold clarity. And Maisie? Was she part of this dead-end life too? Something flickered in Rhea's eyes, the first genuine emotion he'd seen. Maisie would have been fine. Children adapt. Like you adapted when your father left. It was a calculated blow, aimed at the abandonment Rhea had experienced at 12. That anger flashed across her face. "Don't you dare compare." A sound from the front door interrupted her, the unmistakable click of a lock disengaging. Rhea turned sharply, eyes widening as Neil and Leary re-entered the living room. "What is this?" she demanded, backing away. "What's going on?" Leary stepped forward, badge now visible on her belt. "Rhea Brooks, I'm Detective Taryn Leary. I'd like you to tell me exactly what you added to your husband's drink just now." "Nothing," Rhea protested. "This is insane." "Calder, tell them." "I saw you, Rhea," Calder said quietly. "We all did." "You're making a mistake," she insisted, voice rising. "Neil, you know me. Tell her this is ridiculous." Neil's expression was stone. "I saw you too, Rhea. Through the window." "This is a setup," she hissed, looking between them. "You're all in on this. You're trying to frame me. Because what? You want a divorce, Calder? Fine. But this is criminal." Leary remained calm. "Mrs. Brooks, we have substantial evidence linking you to the attempted murder of your husband and the poisoning of Dolores Wynn. Now, we can add this attempt to the list." "Evidence? What evidence?" Rhea's voice had taken on a shrill edge. "Text messages, voice recordings, testimony from multiple witnesses, including your daughter." Calder pulled out his phone. "Would you like to hear yourself planning my death with Vince?" Before he could play anything, the back door burst open with a splintering crack. Vince Elridge stumbled in, blood streaming from his nose, his hands cuffed behind him. "Sorry," the officer escorting him said to Leary. He resisted. Hard. Understanding dawned on Rhea's face as she looked between Vince and Calder. "You knew," she whispered. "All along, you knew." "I knew," Calder confirmed. "From the moment Maisie switched those plates." Vince spat blood onto the floor. "You set us up, you son of a bitch." "Shut up, Vince," Rhea snapped. "Shut up," he laughed bitterly. "It's over, Rhea. Look around. They've got us." "They've got nothing," she insisted. "Without evidence." "Oh, we have evidence," Leary interrupted, nodding to Neil, who produced a small recorder. "Including this conversation, which we've been recording since we walked in. Now, Mrs. Brooks, I'm placing you under arrest for the attempted murder of Calder Brooks." As Leary recited Miranda rights, Rhea's facade finally cracked completely. "You can't prove anything," she screamed at Calder. "It's my word against yours." "Actually," Vince said, his voice eerily calm, "it's your word against mine too. And I'm not going down alone for this." Rhea stared at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about? Insurance fraud? Attempted murder? Conspiracy that's 25 to life, sweetheart. But if I cooperate?" He smiled through bloodied teeth. "Maybe I'll see daylight again before I'm 60. "You wouldn't," she breathed. "Wouldn't I?" Vince turned to Leary. "Detective, I'd like to make a full statement. About both attempts. It was all her idea, you know. The poison, the timing, everything. I just went along with it." "You lying bastard." Rhea lunged at him, only to be restrained by a second officer. "It was your idea. You said it would be easy, untraceable." Leary nodded to the recording device with satisfaction. "Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. That was very helpful." As the officers led Rhea and Vince away, Calder remained motionless in the center of his living room, the home he'd built, the life he believed in, all of it revealed as an elaborate lie. "You okay?" Neil asked quietly, gripping his shoulder. "I will be," Calder replied, surprising himself with the truth of it. From Maisie, through the window, he watched as Rhea was placed in a police car, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. Their eyes met through the glass, and in that moment, Calder felt something inside him settle, not forgiveness. Never that, but a cold, final clarity. It was over 3 months after the arrests. Calder stood at Dolores Wynn's bedside in the long-term care facility, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. The machines monitoring her vital signs beeped steadily, the only sound in the otherwise silent room. The doctors have been cautiously optimistic about her recovery in recent weeks. She had emerged from the coma a month ago, but the brain damage from oxygen deprivation had left her unable to speak and with limited mobility on her right side. Recognition came and went in her eyes. Sometimes she seemed to know Calder and Maisie. Other times she stared through them as if they were strangers. "We brought you flowers, Grandma," Maisie said, carefully placing a bouquet of daisies on a nightstand. "Yellow ones, because you said they're cheerful." Dolores's eyes tracked the movement, a slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, suggesting an attempted smile. "Progress, however small." "Maisie drew you a new picture, too," Calder added, unfolding a colorful drawing from his daughter's backpack. "It's of the three of us at the park." He held it up where Dolores could see. Her gaze lingered on the crayon figures: a tall man with blue eyes, a small girl with pigtails, and an older woman in a wheelchair. Family, reimagined through a child's hopeful vision. When they left an hour later, Maisie skipped ahead to the parking lot, while Calder stopped to speak with Dr. Martinez, who had been overseeing Dolores's care. "Any changes I should know about?" he asked. The doctor consulted her tablet. "Her responsiveness continues to improve gradually. The physical therapy is helping with her right side. There's more movement in the fingers now. But the speech, that's still uncertain." "And the bills?" Calder asked quietly, mindful of Maisie out of earshot. "The court order is being honored. All expenses are being paid from Mrs. Brooks's seized assets, as directed." It had been one of Calder's few requests when the district attorney was preparing the case that Dolores's care be funded from Ria's personal accounts and eventual estate liquidation. The judge had agreed without hesitation. "Thank you," Calder said. "I'll bring Maisie again next week." The past 3 months have been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and profound adjustments. Ria and Vince had been denied bail, deemed flight risks due to the substantial life insurance policy and the seriousness of the charges. The evidence against them was overwhelming, bolstered by Vince's decision to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Through his lawyer, Calder had filed for divorce immediately, citing attempted murder as grounds. The proceedings had been expedited given the circumstances, and the court had granted him full custody of Maisie with no visitation rights for Ria, a decision she was currently appealing from jail. The media frenzy had been difficult to navigate. Local nurse poisons mother in failed murder plot against husband had made headlines across the state. Reporters had camped outside their house, followed Maisie to school, bombarded Calder with requests for interviews. Only Pastor Finch's intervention, offering the church as a temporary sanctuary and arranging for community members to form a protective buffer, had provided any relief. Eventually, as newer scandals captured public attention, the reporters had drifted away. But the gossip remained, whispers following Calder and Maisie through grocery stores and school events. Through it all, Calder had focused on creating stability for Maisie. Regular routines, honest but age-appropriate explanations, and a support network that included Neil, Yvonne, who had become a frequent visitor, and the child psychologist Detective Leary had recommended Tea Frosty's ice cream. Maisie deliberated between flavors with characteristic seriousness before settling on strawberry with chocolate sprinkles. They sat at their usual table by the window, watching afternoon traffic pass on Main Street. "Dad," Maisie asked, licking her spoon, "are we still moving?" "Yes," Calder confirmed. "The new house is almost ready. We can start packing this weekend if you want." After listing their home for sale, he couldn't bear to live in a place where his murder had been planned. Calder had purchased a smaller house on the other side of town. 3 bedrooms, a decent yard, and most importantly, no memories of Ria. "Will my new room be blue like I asked?" "Blue with silver stars on the ceiling," he promised. "And plenty of bookshelves." She nodded, satisfied, then asked the harder question. "When is Mom's trial?" Calder set down his spoon, choosing his words carefully. "Next month. But you don't need to worry about that. Remember what Dr. Wilson told you, that it's grown-up business and my job is just to be a kid," Maisie recited. "But I still think about it." "I know you do, Maisie Daisy. That's normal. Will Mom go to jail forever?" The district attorney had been clear. With the evidence they had, Ria was facing 25 years to life for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. Vince, with his cooperation agreement, would likely serve 18 years. "For a very long time," Calder answered, not wanting to use the word forever with a child who still occasionally cried for a mother despite everything. Maisie absorbed this, pushing the melting ice cream around her bowl. Can I ask one more question? Always. Why did she do it? Why did Mom want to hurt you? It was the question Calder had dreaded, the one he'd hoped she wouldn't ask until she was older. But Maisie had always been perceptive, always needed to understand the world around her. Sometimes, he began slowly, people make very bad choices because they want something they don't have. Your mom wanted a different life, and she believed that hurting me would somehow give her that life. Was it because of the money? Ms. Leary told you it was about insurance. Calder silently cursed the detective's candor within earshot of his daughter. Partly, but it was also about wanting freedom from responsibilities. From me? Maisie's voice was small. No, Calder said firmly, reaching across to take her hand. Never from you. Your mom loves you in her way. She made terrible choices that hurt a lot of people, including you. And now she has to face the consequences of those choices. It wasn't the whole truth. How could he tell his 8-year-old that her mother had been willing to orphan her for money and a new boyfriend? But it wasn't a lie either. The day of Ria's sentencing arrived with unseasonable sunshine, as if nature itself were mocking the somber proceedings. Calder sat in the courtroom gallery between Neil and Pastor Finch, listening as the judge delivered the verdict they'd all expected. Ria and Brooks, having been found guilty of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and the poisoning of Dolores when resulting in grievous bodily harm. This court sentences you to 25 years in state prison without possibility of parole for the first 20 years. The judge continued with details of fines, restitution, and the terms of the eventual supervised release, but Calder barely heard them. His attention was fixed on Ria's rigid back as she stood before the bench, her once immaculate hair now dull in the harsh courtroom lighting. When permitted to speak, she turned slightly, her eyes finding Calder's in the gallery. For a moment, he thought he saw remorse flicker across her face, but it was quickly replaced by the cold calculation he'd come to recognize as her true nature. I made mistakes, she said, addressing the court but looking at Calder. I got lost in a fantasy of a different life, and I let that fantasy consume me. I regret the pain I've caused, especially to my daughter. The words were right, but the delivery was hollow, a performance designed to earn sympathy from the parole board years down the line. Calder felt nothing watching her, neither satisfaction nor anger. Just a dull recognition that the woman he'd married had been a carefully constructed facade all along. As the bailiff led Ria away, she paused briefly, turning toward Calder once more. Tell Maisie I love her, she said, just loud enough for him to hear, but he didn't respond. Some messages he would not deliver, some emotional manipulation he would not enable. Maisie deserved better than false comfort. 6 months later, on a clear autumn evening, Calder and Maisie sat on a blanket in the meadow behind their new house. The setting sun painted the western sky in shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the tall grass. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine from the surrounding woods. Maisie was sketching in her new art book, a hobby she'd taken to with unexpected passion in recent months. Her therapist had suggested creative outlets for processing her complicated emotions, and drawing had proven to be Maisie's favorite form of expression. Today, she was capturing the sunset with careful strokes of colored pencils. Calder watched her work, marveling at his daughter's resilience. The past year had brought changes that would have broken many adults, yet here she was, focused and present, her small face peaceful in the fading light. Their life had settled into new rhythms. The garage was thriving, already turning a profit ahead of their business plan projections. The new house, smaller but warmer somehow, had become truly theirs, with no shadows of the past lurking in its corners. Maisie was doing well in school again, making new friends, slowly reclaiming the childhood that had been disrupted. Dolores had made unexpected progress, now able to communicate with a specialized tablet and regaining enough mobility to manage short distances in her wheelchair. She would never fully recover, but there was a dignity in her adaptation that Calder had come to respect. Twice a month, he and Maisie visited, bringing books to read aloud and updates on their lives. Ria remained in prison, her appeals denied one by one. She still sent letters to Maisie, carefully screened by Calder and Dr. Wilson before being shared. Most went unread, filed away for a time when Maisie might want them. For now, his daughter had chosen distance as her form of self-protection. Dad, Maisie's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Yes, Maisie Daisy. She set her sketchbook aside, drawing her knees up to her chest as she looked out at the darkening tree line. Are we safe now? The question held echoes of all they'd endured, the fear, the betrayal, the hard-won security of their present life. Calder considered his answer carefully, knowing his daughter deserved nothing less than honesty. Safer than ever, he replied, his voice steady and certain. Maisie studied his face, seeming to find reassurance in what she saw there. Good, she said simply, returning to her drawing. Calder gazed out at the horizon, where the last sliver of sunlight was disappearing beyond the mountains. His eyes were cold but satisfied, reflecting not forgiveness, never that, but survival. They had endured. They had rebuilt. They would continue to. In the gathering darkness of an Oregon evening, father and daughter sat side by side, damaged but not defeated, forever changed but somehow whole. Not the family they had been, but the family they had chosen to become.